Hey, so I am here with Benjamin, also known as Basil Be Vegan on social media and YouTube. Hey, Benjamin, hello.
Hello, Michelle.
I really wanted to chat with you because I have noticed that your content is becoming just so more and more powerful for the animals. And we've known each other for several years through street activism and through AAC. And I've interviewed you a couple of times through AAC already. And so I think it's good for us to chat, catch up, and we're hoping that this will reach people's hearts and minds today for the animals. So let's start with, how long have you been vegan and what is your activist origin story? In other words, how did you get radicalized for the animals? What made you get off your seat and get active?
Okay, great. So I've been vegan over 11 years, and I've been active for about 7 or 8 years.
Hmm.
So I think the thing that really got me radical, I'll jump
Hmm.
right to it, but seeing people post pictures of cubes of truth online,
Yeah. Mm.
and because I was living in a small community at the time, and so there wasn't a lot of vegans in real life and activists for me to interact with. So seeing cubes of truth online, and I think that was right when AV was building a lot of momentum, maybe like
Mm.
28 around 2018. So and then seeing videos of vegan Shannon, who's
Oh my
Shannon
gosh.
Blair, vegan activist mom on social media, and I felt like her. How did I word it here? Um, she spoke about the animal exploitation with a level of urgency, conviction, and moral clarity that actually matched the severity of what animals are experiencing. And I think that I had a process of like doubting, like, is it possible that this is this big of an injustice and people just don't know? How could it be? How could it be something so unjust? If so not recognized kind of thing. And then seeing her just getting people's face with the bullhorn and the megaphone and disruptions, I was like, okay, this is real. And then I did my first cube of truth, and that's when I understood what it was to like get active for the animals. And I remember I stood in the cube the entire 3 hours, and that feeling of being
Wow.
able to like kind of self-sacrifice for the animals, like just standing there might be uncomfortable, but it was nothing relative to what they go through, and then feeling like I didn't have the confidence yet to outreach. I was, oh, one day I'll be able to have these conversations, but for now I'll just stand here and do my part and hold the TV. And then shortly after that, it was I did more cubes, and then what really sealed the deal was my first convergence with Animal Activism Collective. Yes. And then
Yes.
that was outside my comfort zone for sure. Going to live in an Airbnb with relative strangers, not being able to have my routine and my food prep and such. And that was a turning point in my life and definitely cemented my identity as an activist. And then to be immersed in a community, to know so many beautiful and a diverse like spectrum of activists, and to do my first disruptions, my first chalktivism. Yeah, that was really what did it.
Ah, totally. I totally get it. Your journey is similar to mine and probably to many other activists, that gradual immersion. But at the same time, it seems to happen pretty quickly. Like once you get your toe in the water, it's like the water just rushes up over you and you realize, I have to be here. This is where belong. This is what I want to do. And I don't know if I hope Shannon knows as well just how influential she is for people in vegan Evan, because she was probably one of my initial influences as well as cubes. And that's one of the first forms of activism that I went to. And because you can play the role of just holding the screen, but holding the screen is so important. It made me feel like, okay, I can actually start now and be a part of this. And then I can evolve to different levels in this.
Mhm.
And that's really important that we let activists know that there's a level for everyone. You don't have to start with the most intensive, you can start, wherever you want to start. And that's really important.
Yes,
So,
just getting started.
yeah, and I think AV too, because a lot of what AV does is they record the interactions, and that is so important. Otherwise, you and I might not have seen the actual interactions. And so, I was going to ask you also about your background in film and media. So, just tell us a little bit about that. How does your background improve your activism? And, would you agree we got to use our gifts and talents and find our strengths in
Hmm.
activists, right? We don't, right? There's a way to apply our natural strengths and abilities and preferences into activism.
Yes. Yes, no, I agree. Can I just touch on the first question real quick because just to
Please.
dispel any like altruistic motives that I had, I was
Mhm.
also motivated because I saw like all these beautiful, sexy people doing cubes, and I was like, damn, I should be there. It was also in large part a motivation for me to have community and to meet other like-minded individuals because I think I was always kind of searching for my tribe,
Mm,
or what kind of group of people feel like I could have camaraderie or belonging with. So that for sure.
that's
Um,
cool.
so yeah, and I guess there's nothing wrong with that, right? To because if
Yeah,
we're
because we're humans. We have to operate in a herd, just like animals. We
yeah.
need our herd, we need our flock, so that we can thrive, and and reminds us that we're not alone, especially when it comes to activism, because we shoulder so much of a burden for the animals as activists. We need each other to lean on. And so,
Hmm.
me too, it was like an eye-opening experience when I discovered there's a community here. There's an vegan activist community, and there's overlap between the vegan community, of course, and the activist community. It
Hmm.
was like a beautiful day. I felt like you, right? When I discovered, like, oh, here I can just insert myself. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. And everybody was so welcoming. Did
Hmm.
you feel that as well?
Definitely,
Okay.
definitely, definitely, yeah. But yeah, maybe like there's that classic video of the person that just starts dancing like on their own kind of something, and like there's some people I look up to them, people that are so courageous and so self-expressed. It doesn't matter if they're the only one dancing or you screaming in the megaphone or disrupting a store, but then
Yeah.
maybe me and other people, like they're like they kind of gave me permission, they're already doing it, and then it was
Mm,
easier for me to join even if I was only the second or the third or whatever to get involved. So
yeah.
big ups to all the people who blaze the trail, for the rest of us to just climb on board and make it maybe a little bit easier.
Yeah. Absolutely. And time flies and things evolve, and when you start something so new like this and so out of your comfort zone, you're right, you have to get on that train and just trust where it's headed. So when you went to film school and studied a little bit of that, did you ever think you'd be using it now to sort of create content, and has that improved your activism?
A little bit was so I went to like kind of like a smaller liberal arts high school, so I was able to learn film, like study film and learn some cool things about editing and composition and stuff. So I think that was influential. I mean, growing up
Mm,
in New York City in a family that like really exposed me to like culture and art and stuff. So I feel like film and watching The Simpsons together and the Wonder Years and all that was kind of a big part of my growing up and family
mm,
bonding. I always felt like
mm.
media was a big part of like kind of my culture or whatnot. But yeah, I think Michael Moore. I don't know if
Make
maybe some of the
more.
audience. Michael Moore, his first. I feel like he was a trailblazer in the documentary genre because his first movie, Roger and Me, just going out with a camcorder to kind of see who he could talk to. I think was hugely influential and successful. So I think I always did want to maybe use my before I was an animal rights activist, did care about human injustices towards humans and the planet, and so I did always maybe think I could use media for that. But no, I didn't. But I didn't. I definitely didn't envision, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, and then of course, before I was an activist, there's always the dream of like, oh, maybe I can become an influencer and have all this passive income and be a digital nomad. Um, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Well, thank goodness we have these platforms, I guess, right? And using them effectively so that you stand out among a crowd is really important in that way.
yes, definitely. Yes, I think that was part of me thinking about social medias, even with like such a small following, because these analytics, like on YouTube or what have you, they tell you, oh, 500 people saw your reel this month or something. And then I'm thinking, and again, not that the two are mutually exclusive, 'cause I definitely encourage people to do multiple forms of activism. But I started thinking, like, if I'm going to go out and do street outreach or a cube, and it's going to take me 3 or 4 hours to get downtown and do the cube, and I may have 15 or 20 conversations. I could spend the same
Mm,
amount of time making a video that gets seen by 500 or 1,000 people, and then just thinking that
Yeah.
these people now are in the comfort of their own homes. They can watch it when they're open. Click the link to bio to Dominion or whatever resources is right there. Seems a lot more accessible than me like handing somebody a card, hoping they're going to scan the QR code or something after a conversation.
Yeah. Exactly. It's yeah, exponentially, obviously, instead of thinking of one to one, the slow way, one to millions, potentially when you put something out there. And so I guess, as a content creator, you always have that in the back of your mind. I'm speaking to this individual who I'm present with right now, but I'm speaking, who knows how many I'm actually speaking to. As
Hmm.
I'm disseminating this knowledge, it can, obviously it's shared over and over and could potentially, reach thousands or millions and become
Yes.
viral in that way. And
Yeah.
you're out on the streets of New York City doing this, which is so really, when you think about it, how bizarre in some ways. But it's so common and ubiquitous that everybody's got their cameras on their phones. But talk about activism in New York City, as you're sort of in that vibe of New York City activism. And every town is different, every city is different, but it's such a major city. What do you reflect on with that makes it different versus a small town, or how New Yorkers respond to the vegan message overall? What makes New York City unique, or people are just people wherever we go to
Hmm.
some degree, but at the same time, a metropolitan area is different than a small town rural area.
Right. I mean, I haven't noticed any major differences
Hmm.
now that I've done outreach like all over the country. Um,
Mm.
Nothing international yet in terms of outreach, but several different cities and rural communities around the country, and I feel like it's generally, and again, I maybe haven't observed or noticed certain differences, but I feel like it's
Hmm.
generally the same. The similar ratio of people being open to not open, certainly the same excuses and the same unwillingness to go vegan, and then when someone is receptive, that it just is easy for them to connect the dots, wherever they are. But
Yeah.
I do feel like I have not tapped into the potential of New York City, just in living in Manhattan, such a dense, densely populated city. The
Mm.
potential to just have so many conversations, whether or to create content, things like stenciling or wheat pasting, when thousands of people are going to come through a certain intersection on a given day. Um, yeah, or the
Yeah.
potential for viral content.
It's
So
right
untapped,
outside your door.
right outside my door. So certainly untapped, for sure. I maybe have noticed, but I guess that could be anywhere, like different times of day, like doing outreach in the afternoon on Sunday, maybe more families and such, then Friday night downtown for Cubes of Truth, etc.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so your issue, a lot of activists have this issue. Like both of us, I do mentoring with new activists, and so do you. And a lot of the barriers they're not internal barriers, they're external barriers. Like literally, they live somewhere where it's so remote and there's no community. I'm also East Coast, New Jersey, New York, Philly area myself. So there's tons of access to groups, and we take that for granted, but in a
Mhm.
good way, we don't have to struggle to find or things that are being organized constantly all the time, every single day, certainly every weekend, multiple things. It's more about deciding where to go this weekend, what to join
Mhm.
into this weekend. And I know you talk a little bit about um, you know, AI and social media, which is so ubiquitous now, and how activists, must capitalize on that and the rise of AI in general.
Mhm.
Any tips for that? Where's AI
Yeah.
going?
Well, I could just say that. Well, I heard Bruce Frederick of Good Food Institute speak, and then he was referencing a quote that he had something when he had worked at PETA, but something, it might not be verbatim, but something like, "There's no plagiarism in the context of animal rights." You know, so
Yeah.
nothing is copyright protected or intellectual property if it's going to help animals, and that's kind of how I feel about AI.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly care about the human toll and environmental toll of AI, but if it's going to help animals, I feel like that's a top priority, and especially with how much things like even just ChatGPT or
Mm.
generative predictive text can accelerate our activism, our advocacy, whether it's writing articles or video scripts or press releases, presentations, public speeches, social media captions, ideas, just ideas for content.
Yeah. It's a very effective tool, obviously,
Hmm.
we're just tapping into that now. And forgive my ignorance because I'm just so not even. AI in general is supposed to be neutral and unbiased, right? It's not a it, but it still has the flavor of a person, right? So when
Hmm.
you have you found bias like animal rights bias, anti-animal rights messaging bias in AI? I haven't really come across it every time I use it. Of course, it's probably mirroring what I usually type in as well, but have you come across where we need to keep continually teach AI about animal exploitation and as an injustice?
Um,
Does that
no,
make
no. I
sense?
mean, I can see how maybe sometimes it can maybe water down the message, like wanting to talk more about the plant-based health or the environment. But I've never, I mean, I've read studies about, just the
Mm,
cognitive dissonance or the speciesism, and I understand that it's been trained on speciesist content.
right.
So and that's just the paradigm we live in this like human exceptionalist mindset, and certainly the people creating AI and programming AI. If there are a couple of vegans in there, I'm sure they're not the only ones at the control of this, right? But yeah, but I agree that generally I haven't found it to be super biased when I'm just using it for my own little kind of
Yeah.
short-sighted purposes here.
Yeah. I usually find that it agrees with me. This is so not addictive, but in such a way you really feel like you're talking to a person who knows you, in some ways. And it continues to surprise me that it's so good that it really does improve my letters or improve my emails or improve what I might have said. I'm like, wow, I thought I had something really good to say. You just made it even better. I mean, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah,
well,
I agree. And I mean, maybe a little bit makes me feel bad for just like the state of human interpersonal relationships, but
yeah,
just that little bit of validation, like, oh, sounds like a great idea, or like I really see where you're coming from with this like big
right.
thinking idea. You're like, okay, cool, thanks. Somebody finally like reflected back to me what I'm saying or feeling.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So, let's talk about because you mentioned AV before, talk about
Mhm.
footage. Um, and in terms of it's obvious to you and I, but maybe to someone listening, why we show footage. Because people are like, don't show me that, of course. And that's part of the reason, so you were affected by the footage, so have I been, but what do you tell pre-vegans why we use footage and what's powerful about that?
Okay, yeah, man. I mean, I think I think the multifaceted, but yeah, I do think that people are so good at doing the cognitive dissonance or the mental gymnastics, as I call it or heard it's been said, that ability to think their way through or rationalize or disassociate. And so when you have the footage, it kind of there's you have to confront this reality. And then especially you were going to ask maybe about how my outreach approach has changed, but when we're always trying inviting people to empathize with animals, the victims that they are contributing towards victimizing, then you have like an example right there, so it doesn't become abstract, it becomes very literal, very real. And then also knowing what undercover investigators go through to get this footage, and understanding that some of these investigations take years in the making just to get a few minutes of footage. So I feel like we're doing justice to the animals and to the activists that, risk so much to get this footage. And then the idea of my friend calls it a touch point activism. So if people are seeing the footage, we might not stop to interact with them, or they might be closed, but at least they're seeing it, and it's some form of like pattern interruption that they have to contend, you know,
Mm,
with the consequences of their choices.
yeah. Yeah, you can't unsee it. So having people see it for the first time or see it again or look longer at it, we know that's going to have some lasting, even if they choose to ignore it, choose to deny it and walk away from it. There's sort of a critical point at which it's undeniable any longer and you can't not know about it. So we're
Hmm.
hoping that it sort of has a life of its own and reminds people that animals are not abstractions, They're not cartoons. They're not just words. They're not thoughts. They are real, just like you and I are having a real experience. They're having a subjective experience. Oh, so awful. And you know, we say in general, let's turn, if you and I were screaming for help, help me, help me, help me, which is what the animals are doing, I would turn toward you and want to try to lend a hand to bring you out of that situation. And so that's why we want to turn toward, not away, you know, from the animals.
Exactly.
You and I mentioned this just before we came on. We were at a vigil together. It was probably a year and a half ago. It might have been 2 years, it might have been. You know, and there are regular vigils out there. We want people to know that that is where you go and bear witness to animals, typically where you can actually see them face to face, eye to eye. They're usually in a transport truck in front of a processing center.
Hmm.
Activists will take footage of them there again to put that in front of people's eyes so that you know that this is really happening. So does anything stand out about your experience in that vigil or in general, watching, you know, and I want everybody to follow, go to your YouTube channel and check it out, you know, for themselves. It's a short video and it's so you know, it's intense going to a vigil and it's heavy and it's sad. Um, but it's impactful. So anything you want to share about that?
So that's actually been my one and only vigil that I've been to, but I
Yeah.
think it's extremely impactful, and I definitely encourage every activist to and vegan to try and at least bear witness once because I think it's very powerful. And not that we should necessarily need reminders of why it's important to fight for animals because it's so blaringly obvious, but maybe you know it is easy to get distracted and just to have that visceral to, to, to to have that kind of visceral motivation of like why I mean and also just how extremely upsetting it is to be so close to them, physically so close to them, and knowing there's nothing we could do because I'm thinking in that moment like what if I just open the hatch and like let them free. We're in the middle of like Newark, New Jersey. What are all these like sheep and cow going to do at that point? Not to mention just if I get locked up and maybe I'm less effective as an activist, or I'm not ready for that right now, right? Or it's not strategic enough. But yeah, no, it's extremely disheartening. And then also, I do feel like for those particular animals, like how maybe what was that like for them to know that to maybe experience some a little bit of empathy or connection for a moment.
Yeah. To share their stories, their legacy, such that
You,
it might make a difference is part of it, and to just stand there with them
mhm.
to let them know that their lives meant something.
Yes,
I think,
yes, and to yeah, just to like look in their eyes, and then also I think for as someone that did exploit animals for so long, like to you know we're so removed from the process, obviously, right? But so in the process, I mean, just the killing and dismembering of animals' bodies, but just to see there, I mean, of course, we never got inside the slaughterhouse. I've never been inside a slaughterhouse, but to see a little bit of like how the apparatus actually works, I'm getting, offloaded, and then seeing over the fence, so you can see like the tractor dumping like organs or body parts or whatever into the dumpster and this whole apparatus. So um, I think it's powerful just to kind of see that.
yeah, to be that close to it,
Hmm.
you know, with the animals. And of course, there's a helpless feeling and all of that. The hardest part, it's almost like I feel like whenever I would go, I would be a little bit in like denial, like, you know, maybe we can freeze time and we'll just keep them here on the truck. And then the hardest part is when the truck is emptied, the sound of them getting off the truck and then just the empty space where they once were, this big empty with like 2 feet of friggin' shit
Hmm.
and piss at the bottom of it because they've been standing in it for the entire trip, you know, and it just it haunts you. It really haunts you. So anyway, we don't want people to click away and we hope that they will listen. And I am actually trying to put these images into people's minds so that it will, you know, reach their empathy for animals in their heart. But as we're talking about different types of activism, and there are so many, and we're educating people, there's a couple of orgs that I wanted to shout out, and I know that you have worked with, and one is ASAP, which is animal. Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, which was founded by Faraz Harsini, who I respect so much and admire as well. So anything that you want to say that just sort of what does ASAP do? Where did they do it? Your experience?
Okay. Yeah. So just I would encourage everyone to go and like watch some of Dr. Faraz's speeches, and
Yeah.
you certainly a lot to learn about ASAP. And I just work with them, so I'm certainly not the end all be all ambassador for
Mhm.
ASAP. But the whole idea is that we can if we kind of the fastest route to a vegan world is to change the culture, veganize the culture at colleges and universities
Yeah.
because of how influential colleges and universities are on just the overall kind of collective culture, but then also how many people of power and influence are come from colleges and universities, and how much power academics have, people that go on to be lead researchers or CEOs or founders, um, come from academia, and the
Oh,
idea that academia is a place where people go specifically to challenge their ideas, learn new things, open their mind.
exactly.
Young people have their whole lives ahead of them. They're potentially their whole careers ahead of them. So, for lack of a better word, it's kind of more bang for your buck when it comes to outreach and turning people vegan, because of how the power, basically how much more potential they have to create change than just say like your average person. That might be harder for someone in midlife with a mortgage and a family to like switch careers versus someone that can easily just change their majors now, who's on fire to fight for animals. Now they can use their major,
Yeah.
if they're in academia, and just kind of the networks that people make in academia with their research professors, et cetera, et cetera. And then also college campuses, because they're kind of these insular communities. For example, New York City, I might talk to somebody at a cube, but when likely are they going to encounter a vegan message, right? And you were going to ask me about my theories of change, and the
Yeah.
idea is that most people don't go vegan the very first time they're exposed to veganism. So the idea is that for most people, it takes a repeated exposure, and the college campuses are, because they're so insular, it's a great opportunity for them to be easily exposed multiple times. Because if students are walk by a table on the quad, and again, some of these large universities like Ohio State University or Texas A&M with like 60, 70,000 students, but most of them have to walk through the quad or some of the main dining halls. So if we're out there tabling with these big bright posters and flags, and veganism is a moral urgency, and then we're postering all over, and then you know and that's kind of the idea, is that it's making it impossible for college and university students to be on campus and to not confront animal exploitation and their role in it. So that's what ASAP
Mhm.
does. So a large part of what we do is just educating students about veganism, the moral urgency of veganism, encouraging them to take decisive action for animals, not just by abstaining from exploiting animals, but then to dedicate their career, whether that's a doctor, to be someone like a Neil Barnard, with start like a PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, or, Dr. Michael Greger, who's influenced so many people to move towards a plant-based diet, or whether it's an alternative protein, something like a Beyond Meat or a Just Egg, which has the potential to
Yeah.
disrupt so much of animal agriculture. Whether
Yeah.
it's someone that's pursuing research, biomedical research science to disrupt animal testing and find alternatives for animal
Yeah.
testing. So there's so many different possibilities that people can use their academic or professional careers in that way. So is that we also have initiatives to get more plant-based options on campus, for in cafeterias and dining halls. And then
Mhm.
also just an educational component. So we'll bring in lawyers to law schools. We'll bring in plant-based physicians to med schools and the pre-med, and just like the general student population as well. So yeah, it's incredible, and it's a small organization, and operates extremely lean, extremely strategically. And also the idea
Mm.
is not only we're just creating vegans, but we're galvanizing so many leaders. It's incredible to see these
Yeah.
18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year olds that are already so active for animals, getting involved in, policy stuff, journalism, outreach. It's incredible. I mean, I only wish that I was, active at that
Yeah.
age.
Me too. I wish
And
someone.
so, but yeah, but that's the idea, is like, someone like an Ingrid Newkirk or a Neil Barnard, or Kip Anderson, the filmmaker who did Christspiracy and Cowspiracy and What the Health, like how much influence have they had? And so
Mhm.
let's intentionally try and create as many of these type of like catalyzing activists that we can.
I love it. So Faraz so brilliantly, sort of created and is tapping into a demographic, at a point in their life where they're just ripe for new thought, right? And for new
Mhm.
action. And you're right, you're helping the innovators of tomorrow. The leaders of this movement are right now in college, some of them, and in an environment where they're already in learning mode, they're already in curiosity mode, rather than later when they're more set in their ways. Their minds are open, and you're right, creating culture, taking that
Mhm.
angle as well.
Yes.
I like all of that. So we definitely want people to check out Allied Scholars for Animal Protection.
Excellent. Yes.
Let's shout out AAC, also Animal Activism Collective, which started as Animal Activism Mentorship because they have a mentorship program, which is you, as a little more experienced activist, get assigned with a less experienced activist who is aspiring to get more effective. So, how has that experience been for you? And you've also been to the convergences. So, anything you want to share?
Okay. I'm forever grateful and I feel indebted to AAC for helping me, contributing so much to me. So I first started as a mentee. And actually, so his now I encourage everybody to check out For Pete's Sake, which is his handle on Instagram. He was actually my mentor. I'm not sure if you knew that, but Pete was my
Lucky you.
mentor.
No,
I
I
was,
didn't.
yeah, no, I'm so lucky. So, I mean, it just that personal touch. I remember there were times when I was, on my way to a cube, like, oh, I don't want to go, and it's, I feel resigned. Oh, what up? Come on, buddy. Get out there. What's wrong? What are you thinking? So it's literally someone, and they do a fantastic job. We have Marissa now, who is tasked with pairing up mentees and mentors. So it's definitely strategic. If you apply to have a mentor, we take into account like your personality trait, what kind of actions you might be interested in, and try and pair you with someone that's a really good fit.
Mm,
So and then I've had really rewarding experience as a mentor now, um, getting to connect with other mentees, and as you mentioned, I think I do try not to take it for granted living in New York City, having access to so many incredible activists, but knowing that not everybody has that experience. So for a lot of
mm.
people, just knowing a vegan over the phone or on the internet can go so far, like as far as empowering them, emboldening them, validating them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another way of, at the end of the day, it's still about the animals, even though we're helping other people to become better activists so they can help other people become better activists, and I find that for myself, being a mentor energizes me. I might be feeling tired and I meet with my mentee and I have to summon within me the energy
Mhm.
again, and that's great. That helps me stay accountable and stay conscious and stay active in that way. And I've had, since I've been with AAC since 2020, since the beginning as a mentee and then a mentor right away. I mean, I guess I've had like 20, a dozen to 20 mentees over the years. I'm guessing they've been all over the world. They've been all over
Mhm.
the world, all over the country,
Yep.
all ages, so it's been such a great exposure to activism everywhere, and just a really great way of being that first time, introduction to all the types of activism and supporting people. Anyway, very, very rewarding. Again, we encourage people to reach out around that. If you're just me, a mentor or mentee, you can go to
Please.
animalactivismcollective.com. So, but as we talk a little bit more about, I guess,
Okay,
some
can we just touch on the
go.
the resources and the convergence aspect of AAC?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the convergences, they have, and again, AAC is just expanding so beautifully right
Mhm.
now, but they have so many opportunities to get involved, and these are really, I mean, so definitely, more of a, what's it called? I mean, obviously harder to take, 4 or 7 days off of work, right, and fly yourself to wherever place the next convergence might be or that you want to attend. But once you get yourself there, I mean, room and board are covered.
Yeah,
So for 7 or 10 days, you do not have to worry about, a minimal expenses on the activist part, right, with the food and things. And then to be immersed in activism culture, it goes so far. it goes because it's one thing to show up, everyone once in a while for a few hours in an afternoon to do activism, but to live day and night and sleep on an air mattress in a room of like 15 other activists, you know, it's incredible. Traveling around the city or the state or wherever your convergence might be is it's such an immersive experience that it will
Yeah.
change you. And then it's just an incredible way to meet activists from all over the world and all
Yeah.
over the country because it is international, right? And then so I highly encourage anyone to get involved. I think they have one coming up this summer, the Ohio Occurrence in Cleveland. That's
Mhm.
only 4 days, so it might be easier for some people to come and take a long weekend. And then the resources, and I mean, I know there's a lot of resources out there to be strengthen our skills as an advocate, but AAC's what do you call it? Cachet of videos is incredible.
Oh,
Is incredible. So everything from like, know your rights to the social sciences behind veganism and
yeah.
behavioral change to how to leverage social media to different, vegan vets to, I mean, there's such a plethora of information out there. And then I just was lucky enough to attend the grassroots animal rights summit in DC. So hopefully it's going to happen again next year. But I highly encourage everyone to
Hmm.
attend that if they can, because just such another immersive experience and so much learning. And generally at these convergences, they also have workshops and panel discussions and stuff as well as in addition to like just doing demos and things. So.
Yeah. Oh my God. Thank you for sharing all that and bringing all of that up. I mean, because you're right, that's AAC's one of the aims of AAC is to educate, to be a one-stop sort of spot that people can easily
Mhm.
go for education, all things activism, all the different what you need to know as an activist, how you need to know your rights and how you need to approach and how to be effective as a resource. It's great, and the convergences are absolutely great. Great networking, great relationship building, and recognizing that you're really, really part of something, that this is one movement. It's much more consolidated. There's much more solidarity is what you recognize when you go to these
Mhm.
large scale where there's everybody around you coming together, converging together, and you can learn about new forms of activism,
Yes,
so
and get outside of our comfort zone because I think it's important that we continue to
Mhm.
get outside of our. And I'm addicted to comfort, so it's hard for me to get uncomfortable. But
Mhm.
things like doing a disruption. I mean, my hats off to these activists that do solo disruptions that just go into a Louis Vuitton just by themselves. But for me, it was so much easier to walk into like whether it was a Publix grocery store or Urban Outfitters, where I had a whole posse with me. Or to
Yeah.
march through the streets of St. Augustine, advocating for dairy cows, like versus me doing it alone versus with a big group, and then also maybe getting outside of my comfort zone just on a personal level. Like I mentioned, I'm someone, like routine and structure is very important. So to be sleeping on an air mattress, not knowing where the food was if I couldn't do the food prep or couldn't get to the gym, but it's like it doesn't matter, at least for 7 or 10 days when we're fighting for animals, and to realize like that stuff is marginally important relative to what we're fighting for.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you've probably found, like I have, that I have grown as a person, that I'm not the same person just as an individual than I was before I started with activism. So, and a lot of that is because we come out of our comfort zone, because we have a bigger why. We have
Yes.
a reason that's bigger than us as little human individuals. We're fighting for all the animals. That's how I feel every time I'm out there. Yes, maybe different groups of animals we're focusing on that day, but really it's about every single animal in every type of exploitation, of which there are too many to mention. The ways
Hmm.
in which, again, it's so normalized, and we exploit animals every single day. And it reminds us to tell people that if you see activists out there on the street with megaphones yelling at a building, we always joke, like, that's what it looks like maybe to an outsider. Why are these people standing here yelling at doors, yelling at windows? That's what it looks like. It's so much more than that, that the activist community is more organized than ever, more
Hmm.
strategic than ever. There is strategy. So is there anything else you want to add to that? Because we talked a little bit about your theory of change, which is how what we are doing as activists strategically leads to the long-term goal. What do you see? How do you verbalize the long-term goal? It's a vegan world, or animal liberation in
Hmm.
general. And we want to work backwards. We think about what is animal liberation? What would that look like? Animal rights might not be the best way of saying it this day because people think, what rights do we want? But there's truth in that too, you know. We
Hmm.
want justice for animals, not to be able to vote, but to just have their friggin' lives, you know. Their
Yeah.
bodies don't belong to us. Their secretions don't belong to us. Anyway,
Hmm.
so anything else you want to share around sort of how we're going to get there?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the ultimate goal would be the eradicate. And again, I'm still learning and evolving, but the eradication of this kind of human exceptionalist, human supremacist mindset, where we feel entitled to dominate other animals. And it's kind of, I think, like that might makes right principle, that just for whatever arbitrary reasons we came up with, maybe because we're physically bigger than animals, that gives us the right to exploit them, or if we're smart enough to trap them, or, conniving enough to trick them, that we have carte blanche to exploit them. So I would say the end goal of vegan world is where humans no longer feel entitled to exploit animals, and that not only that, but at least we grant them enough respect and decency to, at the very minimum, just to leave them alone.
Mm,
So,
yeah,
I mean, I do think,
that's
and I think that's my ultimate dream, is for humans to exercise more empathy for non-human animals and each other. And I do see the basis. I mean, certainly, injustices towards humans and injustices towards animals, there's a common thread, which I think is this supremacist mindset,
mm,
this kind of might makes right mindset. So that would my ultimate goal, is the world with just more empathy in general, where people exercise it, and then there's more
yeah.
justice for all.
Yeah, and so um do you feel like humans are sort of we're all born with empathy, I would say. And I guess we could say generally we lose that or we don't.
Hmm.
Um, so when you're out there talking to people, why does it seem so challenging to change people's hearts and minds about animals? Are people conditioned not to care, to have apathy instead of empathy? Uh, what role does our conscience play? Because we almost have come to expect, and we have to get a thick skin because it's not about us, that people will
Hmm.
get extremely defensive when we bring up consumption of animals, um, and their responsibility in the system that exploits them.
Hmm.
So, you know, what do you keep in mind in terms of human psychology and why it's challenging to reach people?
Okay. What I think, maybe just for my own mental health, or to stay ambitious, I need to believe that, and I do. Part of me does, at least deep down, believe that, yeah, we are born empathetic, and that human exceptionalism is something that we learn. Other forms of bias and prejudice are things that we learn, that we're not necessarily born with. Maybe there is a small segment of the population that is sociopathic or psychopathic, that's incapable of experiencing empathy, but I do think that's a small minority, or at least I want to believe that. And so that's one thing I like about doing outreach, is that we kind of seeing just the potentiality of every human to live empathetically,
Mm,
and to have the courage to act, even but going back to, I think peer and societal pressure is one of the reasons why it's hard for people to change. And I do think that maybe there's something about our neurophysiology, or the way that we evolved in some type of, like you mentioned, herb or tribal context, where we somehow may perceive going against society as an actual life or death. It might feel like, on a visceral level, like threatened, as if we're actual in physical danger, to
mm,
go against the grain, to go against societal norms. So
yeah.
I think we're up against that. Definitely vegan phobia, which has been documented, right? But just this kind of bias that's perpetuated by the media, that
Yeah. That's like
that
dangerous or
is dangerous.
threatening
Yeah, and that
or
your social status, your social status is going to take a hit when you go become vegan.
yeah.
And I know that they've done studies on that, like, if especially if you're vegan versus just plant-based, right? um and then generally, I think maybe people care, but they don't care, they care more about their convenience and taste pleasure than they actually do about the victims or living like a more morally consistent life. So I would say those are the
Yeah,
main
I
things.
agree. Even as we say that, we know people are capable of awakening, right? Of
Yes.
waking up. I mean, so we want to say that because if people recognize their own complacency or themselves in what you're saying, this could be the wake up call you've been waiting for, leading up to, that, we have maybe a worldwide crisis of empathy and it shows up in so many ways, and you're right that veganism plays into people's insecurities. It touches if someone's already sort of insecure about who they are and they want to be liked and accepted. Veganism seems like so radical, so like, okay, now people are going to absolutely not accept me and not like me, and that scares people quite a bit
Hmm.
if they crave that or need that, you know. And
Yeah.
it's not that we as vegans and animal activists never feel insecure or never, it doesn't feel good when people don't like you or people reject you or people hate on you. But at the same time, I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing it. I'm clear. I'm good. I'm
Hmm.
good with that. So, um, yeah. And so talk a little bit about animal sentience. What what do you say to people when they say they're just animals? They're not the same. Are you saying that animals are the same as us? And
Mm.
you talked a little bit about human exceptionalism and human elitism as an ism,
Hmm.
speciesism, like racism, like homophobia, like sexism. So we say that, animals are more alike to us than they are different, and that they absolutely feel pain and suffer. So what would you like
Yeah.
to share about that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I had some notes on that.
Go ahead. Find your notes. It's all
Okay.
good.
Well, I guess just the idea is that just because kind of the gist of what I was trying to say is just because it might, and it still may be hard for me to comprehend that like a shrimp or a chicken value, because I think there is this kind of hierarchy, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, we know that chimps and gorillas
The
and dolphins
spectrum.
are smart,
Hmm.
but like what about a fruit fly or whatever, how small they are or the size of their brain or
Hmm.
whatever. And these are all these kind of traditional tests, right? Like the mirror test where can they recognize themselves? Okay, this is like some
Right.
milestone of intelligence, right? But again, we've designed these tests.
According to
And
us.
according to us,
Exactly.
and we know that there's so many different types of intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
kinetic intelligence. So when people say, "Oh, but we're more intelligent," I'm like, "Well, that should include empathy. So if we're so intelligent, then we should exercise empathy, right? And
Emotional intelligence.
emotional
Mm.
intelligence, right?"
Mm,
But
mm,
but just because it's hard for us to understand that the animals' lives matter to them the same way it matters to us, just because it might be hard to understand, doesn't erase their experience, doesn't take away the fact that it's real for them and that is happening for them. And I think there's that classic saying about privilege, like privilege is a thing because it's not a problem for you, so you don't think it's a problem for other people. I don't know if you've heard that little meme
yeah,
or
I love
whatever
I
about privilege.
hmm
So I think that and again, there's a lot of assumptions that we make, right? And I think that's the reason why we make those assumptions is because it serves us as the oppressor. Like, oh, they're just stupid, or they're not sentient, because oh, how convenient it is for you, because then it makes it easier for you to justify your own objectification of them, right? So even if it just means exercising empathy, like a stretch, like okay, I'm gonna really stretch my mind to empathize with a shrimp or a chicken or a pig or a cow or any animal, but but right, the cost benefit is ridiculous. I mean, just a few days of inconvenience, or you have to shift your lifestyle for a few days or a few weeks. Your gut microbiome has to change, your mindset has to change, a couple difficult conversations with friends and families. I mean, we know it's more than that, right? Because sometimes people are alienated from their friends and family or their spouses, etc., from their professional lives, because it really is different to be outspoken advocate for animals, right? But still, the trade-off for an individual's entire life, not to mention perpetuating such, you know, what was I going to say, a detrimental mindset of human exceptionalism and supremacy. That to me just seems like a crazy trade-off. Even if it's hard, it's like again, and I think empathy is a muscle. Like the more we flex it, the more we exercise it, it gets stronger.
mm.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, man,
totally. No, all of that is so good. That
okay.
absolutely.
And then
Yeah.
maybe I mean I know it's not always a fair comparison, like, you know, to bring companion animals into the mix, but I think certainly a lot of people have had experiences sharing like interspecies empathy exchanges. You know, so I think sometimes that can
Mm.
be a doorway, right? And then maybe we've compartmentalized like companion animals and wild animals, but certainly people, movies like March of the Penguins, or you know, the Planet Earth, you know, whatever, the David Attenborough or whatever, where we marvel at the beauty and the mystique of wild animals, you know. So I don't think it's that much of a stretch for people to have empathy, to experience empathy, or you know, of for beings other than our own species.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. It does prompt us to widen our view and get out of our narrow way of thinking. And people don't always want to do that. It certainly can be a challenge. But what other challenges are worthy of us as humans? The potential that we have to grow and change our minds. And you're making me think that yes, compassion and empathy are higher qualities. They, in some way, they're spiritual qualities or whatever you might call them. They're what we can aspire to, but they require action. It's not enough just to feel like you feel empathy or feel like you feel compassion without the actions, without
Mhm.
lining up the actions. And people will do the mental gymnastics that folks will do to justify their actions, and basically they're arguing with themselves to stay stuck. They're arguing with themselves to keep exploiting. They're arguing for the side of exploiting and not really realizing that. And so, yeah, we're so deeply entrenched in a system that's been going on for so long, from the very first time we ever commodified an animal, and it's
Mhm.
spiraled out of control. But we can trace that history. I'm not versed enough in that, but I've interviewed Jim Mason,
Mhm.
several times. Always fascinating to talk to him because he's like a walking archive of how it all began in our modern world. Where the agribusiness world started and why, and how unnatural it is to be using animals because they
Mhm.
are like us, earthlings. We're all part of nature, and how we've separated them and anyway, and turn them
Mhm.
into commodities and objects is sad for us as a species, to think how far the pendulum has swung for our species to the unkindnesses, that are now, just when you think it couldn't get worse for animals, it gets worse.
Mhm.
Some things are getting better, but still it's crazy. And so, maybe as we sort of talk a little bit more about making the connection with ethics and spirituality, whatever that means for people, however
Mhm.
people define this, not one definition of that, but why is it important to sort of keep ethics front and center, which is, you know, shifts the attention to the animals. Because I know whenever you talk to people like me, you find that they shift it right back to themselves. It's inconvenient for me. It's too hard for me. And I don't want to change my habits like you said. But as we keep redirecting back to the animals and the moral issue of this, the moral urgency, the moral imperative here, um, it's harder to justify. So how do you help lead people back to the ethics or, the spiritual nature of animals?
Mm. Yeah, well, I
How do
would
we
just
do it?
say, we have, I think just, and I guess it's just, you know, an open invite, like just imagine you were an exploited animal, or sometimes we can say, imagine if you were being bullied, if you were being oppressed, because I think a lot of people have an experience of like being a victim of bullying, you know, or some type of unjust behavior, and how urgently would you want that to end? You know, would you want to trade places with this animal right now? Would you accept this as as a reasonable excuse or justifier to stay exploited? Right? And I think
Right.
then people get it. So even if they're not going to change right away, at least maybe they can understand the urgency, or understand just like how the how blatant their hypocrisy is. Like they're like, yes, I would want the oppression to stop urgently. And then the next question is like, okay, so when's the best time to be vegan, to live vegan? Okay, urgently. Okay, so you want to commit? No. Okay, but then at least maybe they have to stew in that, you know, and maybe that the dissonance between what they know is right and what their actions can create, that is maybe the perfect environment for them to shift, right? And
Yeah.
then maybe when they do become an activist, they have that experience as a resource to like exercise empathy for others or to understand how powerful the cognitive dissonance can be, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what, our ability to be able to be in their place, to be in their position and to recognize that and to step out of the sort of fatalism aspect of it that people get into, like it doesn't matter. It's too big. We can't change it, and to help them circle back to what they can do with their own choices and reminding people that if we want to, don't we all want a nonviolent world? And can we ever truly have that while still having violence towards animals? And so,
Mm.
as everybody starts to believe that they're good at heart, in general, and people want to strive to be good. And I mean, I don't have all the answers in terms of the spiritual nature of animals, and people will profess about their purpose. People will profess a lot about humans' purpose and animals' purpose and the purpose of this and the purpose of that, and often that's informed by their religious upbringing, or sometimes it's just their own sort of spiritual belief system. But what do you want to add to that conversation? It's a conversation, right? I don't have all the answers. I believe that in general, animals, just like us, are something non-physical, some essence, some intelligence that goes beyond this world, that they're all part of a collective universal consciousness. So what are your thoughts on that, and how can that help
Okay.
to open minds?
Well, I mean, I guess just to preface it, I don't think someone needs to be spiritual or believe in spirituality to live vegan and become an activist.
Mm.
Because um, I think our morals should exist or do exist outside of any like religious or spiritual framework. But I do believe that there is a spiritual nature to the universe, some type of like divine order to this seeming chaotic world. And I just think, I mean, I like what Jim Mason says is, like that our first art was animals on the wall of these caves. This is to
Yes.
show you. And I think that maybe it's evidenced by how amazing and cool animals are. Like, I don't have any companion animals, but I did grow up with cats, and I do feel that way about cats. Like, shit, I could just watch you for hours, like doing what you do. And so many animals are just so mesmerizing. I mean, I think it's beyond, when people see a whale breach or see dolphins or,
Oh,
manta rays, or, I mean, so many different animals, like, wow, and then just what a diverse, I mean, going from what a diverse range. You're kind of thinking like, damn, you have like a giraffe with this crazy long neck, and then you have these other little animals, and then I was reading a little bit of Ingrid Newkirk's book Animal Kind, just seeing about like just how amazing like the communication systems of whales to like sing a song is heard halfway around the ocean, or the migration of birds that they can remember pigeons, like the GPS, the internal GPS system of a pigeon. I mean, just as examples, and I don't even know
fascinating.
that much, but just like wow. And then also the ability for animals to be empathetic, because I think I had that experience of like the cat I lived with, one of the cats I lived with, like came over to console me because they knew I was upset. And then we see it in nature too, right? The videos that go viral or whatever, of the one animal hugging the other animal or coming over to hug a crying child. And I think that's really cool.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Again, this movement has opened my eye. I thought I loved animals before, and I did, but it's so beyond that now. I don't, I have a fascination, as I'm sure you do too, because we seem to discover there is more awesomeness, more magic, more just profound sort of like mind-blowing how amazing animals are and so unique in their own way. So there's has to be something more to them. And maybe there would be debate about, are they here to teach us? Did they choose to be here to be these teachers, and they're sacrificing themselves? And that's not to say in any way that any single animal ever wants to go through what we put them through.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that, but that maybe there are more of these evolved bodhisattvas, here to be a mirror for our unkindness, for the worst in us, so that we might wake up to what we're doing,
Yeah.
in some ways. And do they have intuition? Yeah, I believe in intuition, that we have a sixth sense, and
Mm-hmm.
and that they do too. So maybe, they are, you're right, when they bond with us, they can read us They can
It's,
sense us, and there's tons of scientific proof to that anyway. But
mhm.
why would we ever stop and want to kill? Like when you think about how just like incredibly, multi-sensory they are, multifaceted, you know, it puts even more of a shameful spotlight on what we,
What we do
what
to
we,
them. That's
yeah.
why I was thinking, like, because that's, I mean, I think it's a literal, it's an analogy, but I think it's a literal thing, like the canary in the coal mine, right? Like, I think, didn't we
Mm,
actually use canaries to die first or whatever when
yes, that's where they
the
came from.
right? And then, so I'm just making me think, like, and I feel like all of our study of animals, even wild animals, is like capturing them, putting them in labs and stuff. So it's like, what would it be if we just had a genuine curiosity? Because that's my understanding of empathy is it's like it's a curiosity, but without judgment or an agenda. It's just a genuine like inquisition into the experience of this being. So what would that be like to study animals if it wasn't just coming from a place? How can we exploit you? What can we get from you? How can we manipulate you? And certainly farm animals, right? I mean, all animals, but there's one book that I saw the title that intrigued me. I haven't read it yet, but something like The Pig That Howls at the Moon, The Emotional Lives of Farmed Animals or something.
Mm,
Um, right. But so it would just be cool to know. And then again, maybe to a certain degree, like we can't know as much if we're just leaving animals alone. We're not capturing them, bringing them into labs to study them. So maybe it's just like out in the field watching them and more of like a sharing an intuition or just a shared presence with them, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. So we want people to go out and read, about this and explore you're right. I mean, animals grieve. There's been tons. I think I interviewed Lori Gruner. If I might not be remembering her name correctly, but she wrote books on, the grieving life of animals and how they grieve for one another. And, you know, um, so, when we think about animals, when they die, do we all think about our mortality, our human mortality? Do we ever think about, certainly with our companion animals, we grieve for our companion animals and we wonder, where did they go? We can't
Hmm.
help but wonder, are they still existing? Where did they go? Did they go to a place? Did they disappear? Are they around us? And people have whatever beliefs they may have come to conclude, but I would say, that for animals, that is a moment of liberation. Not that we want to rush them there or cause them pain, but I believe in my heart of hearts that the instant any of when we die, the moment, it's not a blank experience. It is an eye-opening experience that there is utter freedom and bliss and ecstasy. We are returned to our full self in some way,
Hmm.
and so I don't know, maybe it's just our ways of comforting ourselves that animals are no longer in pain once they're gone beyond that moment,
Hmm.
but nonetheless, you know, um, how can we use our thoughts about the afterlife or the souls of animals to further, I guess broaden our view of animals and how and the treatment and our treatment of them,
Mm.
or
Okay.
share any of your
I think
beliefs,
well, I just
whatever
just
you.
to just if I can reference your interview with Jim Mason again, where
Mhm.
I believe his experience was, as a teenager when his beloved companion animal died, then he asked his pastor, like, will I get to see my dog or whatever in heaven? And he said no, because
I
dogs don't
remember
have
that.
a soul. And that was when he goes, well, if
He
I
was
can't be
like,
in heaven, then I don't like this religion. Then, like,
yeah,
if this religion dictates that I won't, then f you kind of thing. Um, so I mean, I do believe, and I haven't studied much, but I do have some understanding about like um, the continuity of near-death experiences that a lot of people have had, a like
yes,
wide scope and array of different situations, but all kind of this kind of conclusive experience that is very positive. This kind of homecoming or overwhelming sense of peace or gratitude or oneness. So I think it makes my life a little bit easier knowing that when I do die, it's like it's going to be a good thing. um, and then also maybe the idea of that there is some interesting research. Again, I'm not that well versed on it, but University of Virginia about reincarnation. I don't know if you've seen that, but
yeah, sure,
so and then I mean, and again, I'm not well versed in any of this, but the idea of like reincarnation that, and I don't know if it's Buddhist philosophy, but then kind of like that pig could have been our mother, or that could have been our future self, or whatever. And so I
yeah,
think maybe it can be access to empathize with animals when you see just all consciousness is one, and we might be reincarnated in a different animals, but it's just kind of the same consciousness reincarnated just in a different physical biological
yeah,
avatar, so to speak. So maybe it's just an access to empathy to see like that we're not that different, and just the scope of the universe. Certainly, I think when we zoom out and see that like our planet is one in many planets, many solar systems, many galaxies, many dimensions, like how small we really are.
Mm.
So and then
Yeah.
maybe when you I don't know if you've ever seen that one meme, but it's like it zooms all the way in and then all the way out, right? And that there's basically
Mm.
just the galaxies within us too. And then
Wow.
certainly, right, just that we're all made up of the same like substrate and light waves and etc.
Yeah. I love that idea of we are the universe. Everything we can conceptualize, we are that,
Hmm.
and we are walking universes, and we're all creating our own universe. I mean, there's just all that. I find that quantum level of looking, that lens, that quantum lens to look through is comforting and exciting and feels right. If
Hmm.
we can sort of go with our feeling. And you also bring up for me sort of the concept of karma, which isn't necessarily have to be a religious, sort of principle, but the idea of what comes around goes around,
Hmm.
and putting animals into that context as well, that's all coming back. It does ultimately punish us, or it does ultimately affect us. It doesn't feel good. And I don't know, maybe the idea of what if we meet every animal we were responsible for harming, directly or indirect, what if they meet us on the other side and they can
Hmm.
talk now? Now we
Yeah.
can telepathically talk to one another, or they can express themselves in English. Like what would that be like? And you know, making the decisions now while we are alive to mean that the animals who greet us will embrace us. If
Hmm.
they are our beloveds, we are
Yeah.
all each other's beloveds. We are all family. We are all anyway, we're all so.
I
I,
agree. No, I love that quote, the one little meme that says like the only thing we need from animals is a forgiveness.
yeah,
So and then maybe like all life being equal, then certainly we've all, those of us that weren't always vegan, been responsible for a lot of exploitation and mutation and slaughter and confinement, etc. So then maybe just we'll be the one begging for mercy, like, please, I'm sorry, freaking please have mercy on me. Can you
yeah,
teach me a lesson without inflicting too much pain on me, kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so yeah, and all of that, none of that is meant to be overwhelming for I would say to people, because every day is a new opportunity to sort of start clean and think about how your actions affect others. I mean, that's a sign of maturity too, to
Yeah.
really be able to think. It's like when we're a child, we only think about ourselves and how it affects me, but to think about how our actions affect others, including animals and including the planet itself. So my goal here is to redeem myself in a lovingly selfish way, as well as to create a ripple effect, pay it forward for a
Hmm.
better world in that way. And I also love how you mentioned Jim Mason. His ears must be burning right now. My gosh. Let's
I
talk
always recommend that book. I always recommend that book. I need to go back and reread it, but I feel like that was such a pivotal book for me to understand just the
Unnatural
scope.
Order.
Yes, such a scope. Yeah, but then
Beautiful.
maybe if I could
Great.
add one thing about spirituality, because like I know Martin Luther King Jr. was one of my heroes, But again, I don't think that you need to belong to have any religious or spiritual connotations or identity to fight for animals and dedicate your life to animals. But I think the idea of like this infinite game or this long game, fighting for justice that's bigger than us, and right, and if death isn't something to be feared but just part of life, and that we keep fighting, so it's not so much about like what accolades and possessions we accumulate just in our lifetime, but what impact or legacy can we build on, or what momentum can we build on or create that other generations, others that come after us can keep building on, and that is worth
Mm,
fighting for something that may a justice that we may never see in multiple lifetimes, but it's still just as much worth fighting for.
beautiful. Beautiful. You're right. Absolutely. I think, lots of people struggle with mental health issues. Like it's sort of all of us do on some spectrum of struggle with mental wellness, and the quality of our thoughts, and how dark they can get, very dark, our thoughts, or they can be more on the lighter side, and how much choice we have, certainly, in that. But I think that when you think about, that you do have a purpose in this bigger picture, and that you can, make a difference in the lives of animals, it gives you that boost, that I think is a universally human drive, that
Hmm.
we can quiet that drive, that we really want to do better and we want to make a difference in that way. But maybe because we'll wrap up in a bit, because I know we could go on and on, of
Hmm.
course, and we want to go on and on. But anyway, let's
Hmm.
swing it to sort of activist well-being, or for you, your mental, emotional well-being with all the awfulness we see and the secondary trauma of what we witness and the compassion fatigue and stress and things. So, how do you manage not getting burnt out? What can you suggest for that? Resilience over the long term. Do you have any tools that you recommend or?
Yeah. Definitely. So I would just say that the more you can have like surround yourself with other activists and have actual activist friends, I think it goes a long way because then you have more people that get you, right? Because so many people don't get, I mean, it's hard to be got anyway, just, as the average person and the thing just to be understood, but then it's the extra layers when you're an activist, a vegan, and then let alone being an activist. So I think that goes a long way. I would say varied types of activism. Because then I like that one day I might be at a disruption, the next day I might be at a pilot program handing out soy milk to public school children, or whatever. And it can take so many different forms, right? Editing a video, an interview like this, for example. So I would say don't be afraid to vary your types of activism. Um, I'd say for me, I also do prioritize like my because I'm close with my family. So even though I wish they were more active, and I wish that me and mom quality time could be doing a cube together or whatnot, but sometimes that might just be watching a movie or me getting to like prepare her a meal or you know help with the chores for example, so that helps. But then I would just I'm a big advocate of lifestyle preventative care habits and things. So I think the main ones are eating whole foods, and I think a lot of people, I'm very sensitive I know processed food is kind of like an umbrella term, but just like high sugary food, even packaged food, refined food, even a healthy cereal or healthy bread, I feel like I'm quite sensitive. So I'd say focus on the single ingredients, like go to the wheat berries or the farro or the quinoa or something instead of a cereal, like an oatmeal example for instead of a bread or a cereal. Fruits and vegetables. So I've been influenced by a lot of the plant-based physicians, just the importance of green vegetables, both steamed and raw, the importance of fruit, right? So I would say that, and then definitely sleeping. Again, I have a lot to do with sleep hygiene, but I think there's a lot of science out there that supports the importance of getting sleep. And then exercise. So I would say both resistance training, so that could be like body weight or weightlifting or using a resistance band, but to stimulate muscle growth. And then exercise. I don't think exercise maybe has to be too vigorous. Certainly I know there's benefit to like sprinting or high intensity stuff, but I love walking. So I think just moving, walking, dancing, I think those are really good for long term for managing burnout. I don't know if
Oh
that
my
I
God,
think
fantastic. Yeah.
okay. Oh, and then one last thing I was gonna say
Self-care.
is don't be afraid to, I think maybe for more activists to pursue activism as for a job. And I know,
Ah,
and I know that, my mentor Faraz, he'd always say that, activism is not a career, it's not a job because it's not like a 9 to 5. His always analogy is, do you think Beethoven at 5 o'clock stopped composing in his mind? Or you think Einstein stopped thinking about theories of relativity just because it was 5 o'clock on Friday or whatever? No, because in fact, didn't he come up with E equals MC squared riding a bike somewhere or something, right? So the idea is when you're an activist, you're never stop actually being an activist. But I think maybe for a lot of activists, if they actually had an income or had the structure, right, or the context of actually working for an animal rights org or as an animal rights activist, that might help them manage burnout. Because I know a lot of people already have their regular 9 to 5 and families, etc., and then they're doing activism and whenever they can. So I would say don't be afraid to dream big. I mean, I know it's limited, paying positions in the animal rights movement, but I say don't be afraid to like pursue that if that's something that might interest you.
yeah, maybe people are hearing that for the first time. They didn't even realize, because there was a point at which I didn't even realize there were paid positions in the movement, and there are. And I think that's going to just grow more and
Hmm.
more as
Hmm.
new orgs come about, as more funding becomes available, as organizations grow. You know, I like that because on the one hand, we're saying when we do a lot of activism, it starts to create some burnout energy in us. But at the same time, it's also the antidote, right? For
Hmm.
me too. If I'm
Yep.
being inactive, then I'm more anxious, because I'm thinking about what I'm not doing. But then I do things. So I think it's that balance of actions, then take a break. Okay, but come back. Don't
Hmm.
go away from the movement, please. We need you. So please take care of yourself. Like you're saying, I agree, all those self-care tools and practices are super important. I was going to agree with absolutely all of those. In addition, I'll say journaling, like writing about
Mm,
your feelings is helpful. A creative endeavor is helpful. Meditation, which is just creating a light altered state in yourself, or mindfulness, which is just focusing on the present moment and
mhm.
living a little bit more in that fashion in your life. In a
Yeah.
meditative way, living meditatively, living through the practice of mindfulness, not getting too caught up in ruminating over the past or dwelling on the future, even though we need to think about, but still living more so in the
Mm,
present moment is just sort of the space in which, you know, we're more in alignment, we're less caught in our thoughts. So all of those things are very, very, very important.
I agree. Could I add a couple more things real quick to well, one I was gonna say, I talked about varying your activism, but I think things like capacity
Mhm.
building are really important. So hosting like it might be hosting a social event for activists, so
Yeah.
that might look completely different. It might be not actively like, yelling in a megaphone, but I think the capacity building stuff is really important. For example, like I was just hosting some activists that were in town for Anonymous for the Voiceless Convergence, right? And like, so I'm doing laundry and doing the dishes and stuff, but then knowing that they have a comfortable place to sleep while they're out there fighting for the animals. And then they said they appreciated that, right? And then so that's still showing up for animals. I feel like it's kind of like a maybe a less direct way, and then volunteering at sanctuaries, like spending more time with animals, because
Yeah.
I've done that where it's like how I'm helping animals, I'm cleaning out shit from a barn or something, but that's so necessary, and these sanctuaries need help. And I know you're a big advocate volunteering at active sanctuaries, I think almost every weekend. And then when
Mhm.
you get to be with the animals again, I feel like that's also really invigorating. So I just wanted to add that. And then I had a couple tips about for advice for people to get jobs in animal rights. I don't know if I should segue
Sure.
into that real quick. Okay. So one statistic, again, I didn't fact check this, but 70% of people were hired at companies where they had a connection, and estimate that as many to 85% of jobs are filled through networking related channels.
Mm.
Right, and this might not be,
Yes.
when it says connection, it might not be like your best friend, but it might be a friend of a friend, a colleague of a colleague, for example. So I'll say don't shy away from like those second and third tier type of connections that you might make. So that's why I would say volunteer with different organizations, right? And see different styles of demos and campaigns. So I know Humane League, and again, you might disagree with their theories of change or their welfareist approach or incrementalist approach, but then you still get to meet other activists, other organizers, and again, you might disagree. That's something I've learned, is I might disagree with their theory of change, but these are people that have still spent decades in the movement, who are intelligent, who are passionate, who have refine their theories of change or their strategies, and there's still something to learn from them, not to mention the networking opportunities, right? Because you never know when the person you met at Mercy for Animals, now they go on and work for PETA or another org, right? And they've seen your dedication, they've seen your passion. So I was going to say that. And then I was going to say you could make like a Venn diagram of like the skills you like, the skills that you already have or things you like to do, skills you want to learn, and then like what the movement or organizations need, and then find that
Mm.
overlapping area to maybe focus on. It could be things like, tech, could be things like fundraising, project management, could be like social media marketing or SEO optimization, or different things that the movement needs. And then you might be able to create a job for yourself, especially if you're volunteering. Like I know I've seen a lot of,
Yeah.
like there's veganjobs.com, there's animal advocacy careers, where they just need like a volunteer to manage the social media. And you never know when that can turn into either like a paid role at that org, or now you have actual experience and you have metrics to say like I helped this organization grow their social media following from X to Z. And I feel like that's invaluable.
Absolutely
Oh, and
incredible.
apply. Just get out there and apply, because PETA and these other orgs have entry level openings often. You
They
know,
do.
I've seen that. I've seen PETA, like things
Yeah.
like, just working in the mail room, like just sending out stickers and leaflets to people, to going on tour, to being a campaigner, working in school. So maybe if people have a background with like education or working with young children, opportunity, so I would say to start applying.
Yeah. Get involved. Don't think If you think right now I have no experience, I have none of the prerequisites, you just need the drive, the motivation, and start applying and start looking and just getting to know people. to some degree in this movement, I feel like we're 6 degrees of separation to all of us.
Hmm.
When you start to get involved, you see how the interconnection in this small but not so small movement and subgroups, subsets of this movement. And you just sort of start to if you have the heart of an organizer in you, there's tons of ways to organize. If you're more of just a participant in other people's existing organizing, great,
Hmm.
fine, do that as well. There's solo activism, there's, you know, uh, public speaking and seminars and conferences and veg fests and marches. Get involved in one way or the other, behind the scenes or, in terms of participating, because we need numbers.
Hmm.
We definitely in this movement need more,
Yeah.
we need more numbers. So I guess, Benjamin, is there anything we missed that you feel
Yes,
a
one
burning
thing
to
I could touch
share?
on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I think you mentioned, like, one, I would just want to say, I mean, I know it might be trite or cliche, but the whole idea that every conversation matters, and again, I mean, I think one kind of simplistic way is like, oh, I might outreach this person and then they're going to go on to become the next Peter Singer or Earthling Ed or whatever, who's going to then influence so many other people, which could be true, right? And then now things like social media and stuff, you don't have to be an academic to like have a huge reach, right? But I've seen, I was going to give one example. So we have Allied Scholars for Animal Protection has a chapter at Ohio State University, and the chapter lead there decided to drive to Indiana. Again, I don't know the geography of the area, but I feel it's relatively close, at Purdue. So he was tabling in front of Purdue, um, and sometimes we have these big banners that say, like, if you're vegan, grab a cookie or whatever, so that if there's a vegan walking by, like, they'll surely come and talk to us. So he met a student there who then started an Allied Scholars for Animal Protection chapter at Purdue, right? Not to mention now all the impact that this student is having on his college campus, right? But then I was recently at an event here in New York, and then a Columbia student randomly saw one of Sam's videos, an outreach video, and then that inspired him to get in touch with us and Faraz to get involved in Columbia, right? And then so that's just from one student deciding to go table in front of Purdue, and then so I'm seeing in real life the ripple effect,
Mhm.
and not to mention all the students that go vegan and they turn their friends and family vegan, and then again the power of social media to just attract people. And now this one student at Columbia is a PhD in nuclear physics or something like that, and who knows what they can do with their career and their influence and stuff. So I would just say it's really true that every conversation does matter.
Nice. Absolutely. Have conversations, folks. Go out
Hmm.
there. Every day there's an opportunity for a conversation. Don't kick yourself because it's like woulda, coulda, shoulda said,
Hmm.
in that way. So I'm really, as we wrap up, I'm really encouraging people to follow your work. Basically Basil Be Vegan. They can find you on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Good. Yes, yes,
And
and
you
yes.
can DM me. You can DM me 24/7, whether it's because of empathy fatigue, or you've been trolled
Mm.
by a non-vegan, or you want to know how to replace eggs in your baked goods. You can reach out to me anytime, and I'll be gladly to help.
Thank you. Thank you for being a resource for people. Absolutely. Same here. We're here to support each other. We are a community in that way. So my final words to you are thank you for sharing your invaluable insights and experiences. And I mean it when I say your dedication to animal rights is truly inspiring, and your efforts are making a profound difference in the lives of countless beings. And I'm so grateful for your tireless advocacy and the compassion you bring to the world. And I look forward to being beside you for many years to come. So
Thank you,
thank you
Michelle.
very
I feel
much.
the same. I feel the same way about you.
Thank you. Well, folks, please comment and share this video if you enjoyed it. And peace.
Bye for now.
Peace out to everyone. Woohoo.